India has taken over the G20 presidency, and over the next 9 months, 200 meetings are planned across 55 Indian cities. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that One Earth, One Family, One Future will be India's guiding principle during the G20 presidency. Laying out India's priorities, the PM said that challenges like climate change, terrorism and pandemics cannot be resolved by fighting. He added that India will focus on sustainable and environment-friendly lifestyles and depoliticization of supply chains of food, fertilizer and energy. Sources have said that India will like to act as a bridge so that G20 members can tackle issues related to economic growth, indebtedness and reviving momentum on sustainable development goals. Joining me now to take this discussion forward, we are joined by Usha Rao-Monari, Associate Administrator at the UNDP, Ugo Astuto, European Union Ambassador to India, Philipp Ackermann, German Ambassador to India, and Vincenzo di Luca, Italian Ambassador to India. Thank you very much for joining us here on Global Eye. Ambassador Astuto, what would be European Union's priorities during the G20? What would be your expectation from India?
Well, look, the G20 is a strong pillar of multilateral cooperation. And we, as European Union, we are fully committed to the success of the G20 process. The G20 process is key for addressing existing and emerging global challenges. Challenges which have intensified following COVID and then following the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. So we need to ensure that multilateralism works also in times of crisis. And I think that India's leadership will be instrumental in taking the G20 agenda forward. India is a very influential player and is in a good position to shape the agenda for the global common goods. In order to address challenges such as climate change, biodiversity loss, fight against possible future pandemics, the achievement of sustainable development goals, a human-centric digital transition. But quite a number of global challenges where the G20 can play a role and where there are high expectations from the Indian presidency, and I'm pretty sure that these expectations will be met.
Right. So high expectations from the India presidency of the G20. Ambassador Philipp, to get you in at this stage, the Russia-Ukraine war has disrupted global supply chains. The impact on energy supply chains is being felt across Europe and in Germany as well very strongly. What would be your expectation in terms of India helping in mitigating the impact, the economic impact of the Ukraine-Russia war?
Well, I would say that my government is very open, or my country is very open to any debate on the resilience of supply chains. I think what we have seen is that dependence on one provider is not a good thing. We have learned that the hard way, I would say, and we need, after COVID and after the Russian war of aggression, we need to come together and try to make supply chains resilient, more resilient. And therefore, I think the G20 is maybe a very good format where we somehow feel and can develop ways and means to make this resilience stronger. And I think that's one of the items that should be thoroughly and constructively debated during the next 12 months.
Right, so you expect a strong debate on strong and resilient supply chains as well. Ambassador Vincenzo, from Italy's experience of the G20, how difficult would it be to come to a consensus on some of the very critical issues that we face today, including the indebtedness of countries?
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, let me express really a great appreciation for the role played by India in Bali in helping in finding a consensus or a majority consensus on the leaders' declaration. And I hope this is a good step towards a successful Indian presidency. In our experience, we focus on some of the global issues, like the fight against pandemic, the security in food and agricultural supply, and also in the finance for climate. We start some mechanisms that we hope can be implemented and also have further achievement during the G20 Indian presidency.
Right. Usha Manori, in terms of the UNDP's approach to the G20, you have been here having meetings at the Niti Aayog with different stakeholders. What would you like to apprise the world about at the G20?
I think, well, first of all, I've had a very productive set of meetings in the 3 days that I've been here. And, you know, we consider ourselves at UNDP to be a key partner of the government. And what we hope and what we see the government doing is putting in place an SDG action plan, which is exactly what is needed to move to the next level. There's a lot of discussion that has taken place on what has to be done and what could be done, but what India is trying to do in its leadership of the G20 is put in place an action plan and models and ways forward that should take us through to achieving Agenda 2030.
Right. Ambassador Astuto, coming to you at this point, there was a lot of tension over the Russia-Ukraine war, its impact, how to bring Russia to book during the G20 in Bali as well over the last couple of months. How do you think these issues are going to spill over to the India presidency of the G20?
Well, look, Russia's aggression, Russia's unprovoked and unjustified aggression against a neighbor is a clear violation of international law and of the UN Charter. And we also see in liberated zones, in areas liberated from the Russian occupation, mounting evidence of horrific war crimes. And as we speak, we assist to the bombing of civilian infrastructure, particularly energy infrastructure, with a clear objective to make the population suffer. In the meantime, Russia has also weaponized energy prices and food prices. It's a deliberate policy which puts at risk energy and food safety, particularly in the most vulnerable countries in the south of the world. So this is to say that clearly this is not a business as usual. We need to seek accountability for Russia's aggression, and we cannot let this aggression go scot-free. It's important that Russia is made accountable, and President Putin is convinced he needs to stop hostilities and withdraw. And here we are talking about the general interest of the international community.
Right. Ambassador Philipp, to speak to you about Germany's role when it comes to depoliticization of supply chain, also to end weaponization of trade and crucial linkages when it comes to fertilizers, energy, fuel, and food. What would Germany's message be at the G20, and what would you hope that India would do on that front?
So we have seen, as you rightly say, that the Russians have made international trade a tool, a political tool. We have seen their policy towards grain exports or fertilizer exports becoming somehow hostage to this conflict. And what we should do at any price is, I think, find solutions that trade routes and chains are re-established and not interrupted anymore. We would need a resilience and a reliability when it comes to transport of goods that are urgently needed in many parts of the world. We are very happy about that UN-Turkey negotiated agreement on grain transports, but I think that can only be the beginning. What we need at the end of the day is a reliable framework where goods can be transported to the places where they are urgently needed. And that is one of the very, very negative impacts this terrible crisis has on the world, not only on Europe, but on the world. And we should see to it that this will stop.
Right. Usha Manori, when it comes to climate finance, when it comes to SDGs, even the Indian government has been saying that sustainable development goals of different countries have lost momentum, and there is a need to resuscitate the focus on sustainability and climate action. What progress would you expect from India's presidency of the G20?
I think there has to be some collective thinking around financing the SDGs. I wouldn't say that SDGs have taken a or any such thing, but I do believe that we have to look at finance a little differently. In that sense, I think it's not just a question of Asian finance, it's also adaptation finance, and the last COP spoke to this. If you look at SDGs as a whole, one of the things the UN system is looking at is the stimulus plan, where we're saying there has to be an intentional and collective look at dedicating a certain percentage of GDP resources towards achieving the SDGs by 2030. And I think if that intentionality is not there, and if there's not a coming together of the various sources of finance, then that would put us in a place where we may not achieve the SDGs.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. We still have with us Usha Rao-Monari, Associate Administrator at the UNDP, Ugo Astuto, EU Envoy to India, Philipp Ackermann, German Ambassador to India, and Vincenzo di Luca, Italian Ambassador to India. Thank you very much for staying with us on Global Eye. Ambassador Vincenzo, coming to you now, looking at what was delivered at COP27, what can the G20 do in order to progress further on the issue of climate finance? Countries like India have been asking for finance at concessional rates. They've also said that the current quantum of climate finance that the world is committing to is not enough, and also on loss and damage. What kind of deliverables would you like to see at the G20?
In Cairo COP27, there was a resolution, an agreement on the fund for loss and damages. At the same time, we should make more progress also in fighting the CO2 emission. That is a process that has to go on in a much faster way. And that means that we have to try to utilize all the existing financial mechanisms, also to make more efficient the multilateral financial institution, have synergies between bilateral and multilateral funds, because we have to have the best use of the existing public funds. At the same time, we should also try to have interaction between public and private sector in promoting more financing for climate change. In order to do that, we need a more predictable environment in terms of regulation, in terms of targets, not only long-term, but also short-term and sectorial targets.
Right. Ms. Usha, just to ask you about debt relief and indebtedness of countries, which has increased during the COVID-19 pandemic, also exacerbated by the impact of the Ukraine-Russia war. What can the G20 do to reduce the indebtedness of countries, provide them relief? For example, we had Mr. Amitabh Kant saying that we need China to play a greater role here. IMF and other multilateral organizations will have to step up and offer some sort of arrangement.
Absolutely correct. I think debt has become an issue that has to be discussed and has to be discussed in all fora. UNDP recently came out with a report, by the way, called Avoiding Too Little Too Late, around this issue of debt and international debt relief. And what it found is that 54 developing economies, which is roughly 40% of low and middle income countries, are suffering from severe debt relief. So something has to be done about this, otherwise we won't achieve the SDG goals, and indeed we won't even achieve the financing goals we've set for ourselves. So as far as debt relief is concerned, there has to be, again, a collective action around bringing the creditors and debtors together and looking at restructuring or looking at solutions to bringing down the level of debt that these countries have. Because when fiscal space is as narrow as it is today in many of these countries, it is very different for them to raise more debt to fund their NDCs or fund their SDG ambitions.
Right. Ambassador Philipp, just a few weeks back, we had Janet Yellen, the US Treasury Secretary, visiting India, and she threw up an idea of friendshoring, where US would like to have alliances or supply chains with key partners, key allies in the world, in order to make sure that they are not disrupted by weaponization of supply chains, weaponization of global trade, energy lines, etc. Would there be an idea that the German Chancellor would like to throw up at the G20?
I'm not privileged to know the German Chancellor's agenda yet. You know, the summit will come up in September only, and we will see what kind of world we are living in by then. You know, the world is changing very quickly those days. But I wanted to underline that, you know, the supply chain questions you have asked me about is a very urgent one. And, you know, the American proposal you were referring to is certainly one we should look into more thoroughly. So I think building up reliable and resilient supply chains should be one of our main priorities, because we see that a global crisis like the war of aggression of Russia in Ukraine is disturbing supply chains in such a way that, you know, countries like, let's say, Senegal or even Ecuador start suffering a lot. So I think that's every proposal to make these supply chains more resilient and more reliable is welcome, and therefore I welcome also the proposal by the American Finance Secretary in this regard.
Right. Ambassador Astuto, when it comes to global inequalities or lifting people out of poverty, what can the G20 really do? What would the European Union like to propose over the next 1 year?
Well, look, the issue of debt relief has already been touched. Climate change, in a way, the fight against climate change also is appearing when it comes to the fight against global inequalities. The European Union, its member states have been at the forefront in trying to implement the policy of solidarity, particularly vis-à-vis the global south. As you may know, the European Union is as a bloc is the first provider of development aid globally, and also the first global provider of public finance to fight climate. So I think the point of leaving no one behind, of revisiting aspects of the globalization which have been seen as not producing fair outcomes globally. I think that's all part of a global conversation when the European Union is ready to participate proactively.
Right. My final set of questions to all our guests. We're looking at a time of great geopolitical uncertainty, and every G20 takes place in a certain global context. Ambassador Vincenzo, while the G20 is not a security platform, does not look at security or conflicts as such, it looks at global economic problems, how difficult would it be to come to a consensus looking at the divisions that we see in the world today between the West and China, between the West and Russia?
Yes, we are in a situation where finding global consensus, of course, is an increasing challenge in all the sectors, especially in security. But I'm confident that for the background of the Indian presidency already expressed in Bali and what can India do, I am confident that some progress, because, you know, G20 is a process, it's not just an event, it's a process in several fields. And I think India can contribute to some achievements in some of the global issues, as I mentioned before, like climate change, like health, like debt relief, like digitalization of and sharing data on digitalization. I'm confident that the Indian presidency will get results and achievements in all these fields. Thank you.
Right. Ambassador Philipp, according to you, how difficult would it be for India to manage conflicting interests during its year-long presidency? Yes, we have close ties, historic ties, defense ties with Russia. We have a complicated relationship with China, very close relationship with the European countries, including Germany, also with the United States. How do you think it would be difficult, or how would it really pan out for India when it comes to accommodating different interests on the G20 platform?
So let me start by saying that I think any format of 20 so different countries like the G20 and their guests, we have more countries than only the G20, will be difficult to manage somehow. It's the conflicting interests are, this is mathematically clear, are bigger the more you get around the table. So this is a problem per se. Then I think with one partner having started a war, one country that has started a war at the table, that makes things, of course, way more complicated. Now we don't know what situation we are in when it comes to September 23, when the summit will take place in India. But I think I'm not entirely convinced that the conflict will by then be over. So I think we have to take into consideration that this conflict will go on. Now, you were referring, I think rightly so, to the unique positioning of India in this, having good relations with many of the partners, including Russia. So maybe that's a good moment for India to be the president of the G20. It's a huge challenge, I would say, but I see also a certain advantage of having India in the chair, because this is a country that can maybe cater to all sides in a very, very constructive manner. So my hopes are high, our expectations are high. I think this is a moment where India can put all its international weight in a very, very, very unruly, very tumultuous geopolitical situation, and I hope it can do good in this.
Right. My final question to you, Ambassador Astuto, we've completely run out of time, but just very briefly to touch upon the role of China. President Xi Jinping is now stronger after the party Congress. He's got a much stronger political position. Do you expect a hardened stance by China at the G20 over the next 9 months?
Well, I guess I'm not in a position to speculate about that. What I can say is that the European Union has a complex relationship with China. China is an important and indispensable negotiating partner to address global challenges such as climate change, challenges that will be discussed at the G20 as well. China is also an important trade partner, and from China we expect, obviously, to work for a rules-based system when it comes also to international trade, a level playing field. China is also a systemic rival in the sense that its system of governance is definitely different from the principles we hold here in the European Union as an open market and open society and representative democracy. At the same time, clearly, we are ready to work together with China, and at the same time holding firm on the values and interests that we need to defend.
All right, we've run out of time, but Usha, Rao, Ambassador Astuto, Ambassador Philipp, Ambassador Vincenzo, thank you very much for being with us here on Global Eye, telling us what the world wants from India during its G20 presidency.